Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and our guests for today. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. As you all know, we are taking each and every episode as an opportunity to grow, to heal, to thrive. Every single one of my guests, I'm so fortunate. We all learn something from each and every one. I'm sure you're going to learn tons from Rachel today. Sometimes we have survivors, sometimes we have survivors and experts, and I think you're going to learn so much from Rachel and her area of expertise in healing and trauma. I'll call it trauma repair, perhaps, and I'll just introduce her just briefly. So Rachel Stanton is a psychotherapist with a practice in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. Rachel specializes in helping people heal after bad things happen, like sexual assault and abuse. She has a unique style in working with her clients, offering EMDR intensives that help provide a way to get better in just days and not years. She works with her clients for 4 to 5 hours a day for as many days as it takes for the client to feel an achievement of peace and well-being. My goodness, that sounds so interesting, Rachel. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Where did you grow up? Like, how did you start out life?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up right outside of Tampa, Florida. So I'm a Southerner, although I do feel like Florida's a little different from the South. At least when I was growing up, it felt that way. Let's see, what can I say about where I grew up? I think it was a pretty middle class neighborhood. I had not a lot of family in the area, so it was just me and my parents. And I think we lived kind of in the same house, same street until I turned 18. And I had a lot of good friends on my street that I grew up with. Good environment. Yeah.
Okay. And did you decide you knew always you wanted to go and study and be a psychologist, or when did you start heading in that direction?
Yeah. So, gosh. Okay. So when I was so I'm a social worker now. When I was in high school, my high school actually offered a AP psychology class, though, that I loved. And during that time, I had a good friend who told me that her stepdad was sexually abusing her younger sister and had actually sexually abused her as well. And at that time, when I was in high school, that felt incredibly overwhelming, and I wanted to help my friend, but I felt very powerless, helpless. I didn't know what to do and really who to turn to, and she didn't want anybody to find out about it, so I didn't go to any of the adults in my life with it. But that was a pretty significant experience for me because she was a really close friend. She talked to me a lot about it, and I think that was kind of when I started feeling I would like to know what to do in this situation. I want to know how to help. And so that was probably a kind of a starting point around then when I was like, okay, I think when I go to college, I want to study, how do I help people through situations like
Okay, great. So then you graduate from high school, and where did you go to school next?
I went to Appalachian State University, which is in North Carolina in the mountains. And it's in a little small town called Boone. I I majored in psychology.
Okay, so now and how is it? I guess tell us about anything else you want to share about, personal life. I know you mostly wanted to talk about your practice, but is there anything else that our listeners would benefit from knowing about you?
Um, I'm not sure. I think parts of, hmm, I guess I can share just a little bit of like how I got here. When when I was in college, actually at Appalachian State, I had a really good friend at that time who was sexually assaulted, and she came to me right after the assault happened, and it was a very similar like experience of like, oh my God, what do we do? We felt powerless, helpless, uh, she actually went to trial. She wound up going to the police and reported it. And I think being a part of that process, it really was horrific. It was a horrific trial. I had to be a witness. And I just remember the way that we were treated and by the criminal justice system was just awful. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of a second like personal experience where I was like, I need to like figure out what to do in these situations. I don't like that. None of us like that kind of powerless, helpless feeling, and seeing people suffer. And so that was, I think.
So your friends inspired you. That's really interesting,
Yeah,
Rachel.
that kind of, at least it sort of felt kind of back to back. And then when I left college, I went and I lived in Chicago for some time, and I worked with adults with intellectual disabilities, which was really lovely. I worked in a group home there for a while. And then I experienced a physical assault by a coworker there. And so that was another kind of formative experience. I definitely developed kind of full-blown PTSD from that experience. I went and worked with this amazing therapist who did EMDR with me, and it was like life-saving. It was like just such a good experience. I was like I really like felt completely healed. It felt like it was over. I'm like, okay, wow, this is amazing. And that was around the time I decided to go to grad school, so I could go and be a therapist and help other people. So then I moved to Boston, went to Boston College, and studied social work there. And then I worked for a number of years in the prison system, then in a hospital, and then I've been in private practice probably I think it's been like 7 or 8 years. Just in private practice.
Okay, so how did you conceptualize the private practice and the work you're doing, and describe how is it so effective?
Yeah, okay. So around the time that I went into private practice, or shortly before that, really, I had started developing like a specialty in working with trauma survivors. That was a lot of what I was seeing in the hospital system and in the prison system. It felt like what we're treating in a lot of these other mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, underneath it is really trauma. And, sometimes in the mental health world, we can kind of spin our wheels trying to, work with depression, try to heal anxiety. But if you don't really get to the root, the underlying traumatic experiences that are leading to that, it just keeps coming back, and it just keeps coming back, and it just keeps coming back. So I really went kind of full force into like studying everything I could about trauma. I did some stuff with Bessel van der Kolk at the Trauma Center in Brookline, which is closed now, but it was kind of the place to be at that time. And then I did some stuff with the Trauma Institute in Northampton, where I learned EMDR, progressive counting. And then I started training in sensory motor psychotherapy. These are all modalities for treating trauma. And then as I started my private practice, I started seeing a lot of clients that were dealing with sexual trauma, either childhood sexual abuse or sexual assault. And I think because of my background, I felt really drawn to those clients. I was like, I really like this particular work. It's kind of a niche. There's some things about sexual trauma that are a little bit different from other forms of trauma. The shame piece, the sense of like, it's my fault, even though I know intellectually it's not my fault, it still actually really feels like my fault. Some of the dissociation stuff that can come up for people who survived like childhood sexual abuse. I just found all of that like really meaningful work. So then I really kind of have gone full force into specializing with that population.
Hi, this is Katie Koestner, and I wanted to remind all of our listeners about the free National Sexual Assault Legal Hotline. We at Take Back the Night have assembled an incredible team of attorneys, trauma-informed, who truly believe survivors and want to support their journeys in healing and finding justice. The Get Justice Hotline is 567-SHATTER, or feel free to fill out a form on the Take Back the Night website, share your story, let the attorneys know what's going on, and they will get back to you as soon as possible with all of your legal options. That is a service we are delighted to provide through Take Back the Night. Okay, so describe, I guess, thank you for sharing all about you. Maybe let's spend the rest of the time talking exactly about what this EMDR is.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about it on the show, but never in the way that you do it. So maybe let's do a quick brief, like what is it and how does it work? And then how does your specific method work really well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, if you wanted to, let me think about this. We could do like a fake little session. If you wanted, we could use something for you that's not a traumatic memory. But you could use like a recent experience, and I can do a little example of kind of how we set it up. I'd be happy to do that if you want. Think about
Well, maybe you could describe it. How would describe it?
Okay. So
is that way I think all of our listeners can kind of go along and like step 1, 2, 3, maybe like that.
Yes. Okay. So with EMDR, there's 8 different phases. But in general, I think it's helpful to think about trauma work in general, and the same with EMDR, is kind of happening in 3 stages. So I break it down into 3. The first stage is really building that sense of trust and safety between, the therapist and the client, feeling like, oh, okay, this is an okay place, safe place to do this work. We look at doing things like developing coping skills. We look at if there are certain things going on in life right now that we need to like address. So for example, addictions can be something where we may not want to do in-depth trauma work if there's like an active addiction going on, or if I'm actively suicidal, so there's this like, we kind of look at it as like a preparatory phase of like preparing the person, strengthening the person so that when we go into the next step, which is trauma processing, they feel stable enough to do that work.
Okay.
And so that really varies for an individual. So some people, that looks like an hour, and for some people that could be years, just kind of like working through kind of getting a sense of stability enough to really be able to do the work. In that second stage, that's when we are using, so one of the things that kind of the way people think about EMDR, so it's often like eye movements. So people are working with the therapist and they are targeting, a specific memory, something from the past. And the therapist will assist them in, moving their eyes back and forth, or some therapists use paddles where they hold it in their hands and they vibrate. And what's happening is we call it bilateral stimulation. But it is stimulating both sides of the brain. And the person is thinking, there's kind of this dance where they have like one door that's in the present moment. They're in the office with the therapist, and then they have one foot that's kind of back there and then in the memory. And so they're thinking about the memory, and then every so often, every, let's say 30 seconds or so, it kind of varies, you check back in with the therapist. The therapist will ask, like, hey, what comes up? There might be a little bit of checking in around the material that's coming up. If the therapist has to kind of assist the person in really staying with the memory. So, sometimes like when we're doing EMDR, somebody can get into a place where like, this memory reminds them of this thing and that thing and this thing. So sometimes a therapist can kind of help like contain that a little bit and make sure we're really sticking to this one particular memory so their brain doesn't have too much to process. And really you do that. I mean, I'm kind of talking about this in broad strokes, but it's actually a pretty simple process. You do that until when the person thinks about the memory, there's no charge. So for example, when I'm starting a memory with a client, I'll say, when you think about that memory, how bad does it feel now? 0 is no bad feeling. 10 is the worst possible feeling. How bad is the feeling now? And the person might say a 7, a 10, whatever. We keep going until the person says a 0, and it stays consistently a 0 for a few rounds.
So, okay. This is so helpful,
Rachel.
Oh, good. Let me clarify a couple things.
Okay.
Let's say the memory is being sexually abused as a child. And it wasn't just once, but it happened many times. How do you choose which incident?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Do they pick one? Like, do you do the first one? Do you do the most recent one? Do you do the worst of all one?
Oh my! So you just touched on the big 3. You answered your own question. So congratulations.
I was just guessing. I have no training, Rachel. I am just guessing.
No, but that's right. So for me, I do EMDR intensive. So what that means is like we are sitting together for like a few hours each day for consecutive days until we process through everything. That being said, the way that the brain works, because it makes so many connections between memories, you don't have to actually process every single instance. So something that happened, 150 times, your brain doesn't necessarily have to do 150 distinct memories. So what we do with things that happened chronically is we would do the first instance, and it doesn't have to be, this sounds odd to say, but it really doesn't have to be accurate. It could just be like, when I ask you, like, when you think about the first time that X thing happened, whatever the first memory is that pops in their mind, that's what we're going to do. So we do the first memory, then we move and we do the worst memory, and then we do the most recent or the last memory.
What I said. I was just guessing. I was just randomly guessing. I promise.
Oftentimes, when you do those big 3, it really those other memories kind of in between actually really do get processed. And any that don't, once we do those first big 3, we'll go back through and kind of have, I would say like, okay, I want you to look at like kind of like you're watching a movie in your mind, every instance that X thing happened, and just stop and tell me when you land on a memory that still holds a charge. And so we'll then, after doing those 3, we'll kind of go back through and clear any other memories that still hold a charge.
Okay, here's my next question then, Rachel. Next one would be, you said hold a charge. Now, like you can say something feels really bad or just painful to think about, but how do you separate when something feels painful to think about versus saying like, I don't want to forget. Some people say like in my world of Survivor, talking to thousands and thousands, they'll say, I don't want to forget about it because it spurs me to action, or I don't want to forget about it because I'm worried that I'll forgive the abuser, right? Like a couple things will come up like, maybe I don't want to completely negate this or nullify my anger about it, because then it feels like they're winning.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so maybe let's deal with that question first.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a huge issue that comes up all the time. And I think there's sort of two things, I think probably more than two things, but my mind kind of goes to sort of two things that are going on. One is, it is a belief around, like, if this memory no longer holds a charge, it means that it wasn't a bad thing that happened to me, right? There's that assumption kind of being made, right? Like, it's kind of like saying, oh, that sort of lets the person off the hook or whatever, and so I think that's one aspect of it. And I think another aspect of it is actually a function of our brain's response to trauma, which is a sense of, I need to be vigilant so that this doesn't happen again. And so I think for some people, truly, the idea of these memories not holding a charge is scary, because it seems like, well, then what? Am I just going to feel safe walking around in the world? And I shouldn't feel safe. But that's actually that's the trauma response itself, right? Saying we need to be vigilant against these things. So I think those are kind of the two scenarios that I often kind of hear from survivors when I'm meeting with them. It's like, I want to keep this vigilance. I want to keep this fear, because a belief that that's what keeps me safe, and will keep me safe in the future, which isn't actually true, but trauma brain feels that way. And I think there are aspects to that are true. We don't want to be blasé in the face of danger. When things are unsafe, we want to be able to, react. But EMDR won't take that away from you. So I kind of tell people that the way that you feel after processing a memory is like the person and the event doesn't hold control over you anymore. And that, I think, is really appealing. And it's true. It's like, I can remember what happened. It is not the same thing as saying it was an okay thing that happened, or it was a good thing that happened.
Hi, everybody. It's Katie Koestner. Just a quick interruption. We want you to know that there is an entire shop full of cool merch on the Take Back the Night website to support your own healing journey, that of someone you care about. There are t-shirts, there's bracelets, there's glow-in-the-dark stuff. There's all kinds of unique special edition from our artist series as well. So please take a look. If it's a holiday or a special occasion or just a gift to yourself, support Take Back the Night through your purchase. Sorry, Rachel, I'm like pelting you with questions.
Oh, that's good. I love it.
Another question then. Let's say the control goes away, right? Like the feeling of they're controlling my life. The other one that I mentioned was that, does that mean I forgive them, or will I soften myself? Because sometimes perpetrators come back in your life, right? So if I don't have this fear of them because of the work, what about I'll say recidivism of like getting back in? It could have been a parent or an aunt, or, it could have been a boyfriend. It could have been somebody who could come back, and they're not locked up forever. That's pretty rare. So what about, how does doing the therapy then impact the resiliency of saying, like, I've said to myself, no, I'm not going to forgive them. They say, please forgive me, but they're going to come back and do it again. Like, what about that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. And the analogy that I use for people is that trauma makes us put on a particular set of sunglasses. And that's the lens through which we see everything. It distorts what we see and how we perceive the world, and also how we perceive people. What we're doing in the processing is, we are not going to make you forgive anybody. We're not going to make you decide to go back with a person. What we're doing is we're taking the glasses off so that you're seeing the world clearly. And I think that that's important, because when we see the world and the people around us clearly for who they are, what they did, what happened, we are less likely to be kind of drawn in, right, to an unsafe situation or with an unsafe person, because maybe we have our, kind of our shame and our guilt sunglasses on, or, right, we're thinking about that stuff. But I tell people, like, thinking about the forgiveness piece of it, forgiveness is really a cognitive decision. That's something you decide. What we're looking at is taking the pain away. When the pain goes away, you make whatever decisions you want, right? You can decide, I forgive them, I don't forgive them. It doesn't matter. But what we're doing is we're kind of taking the knife out of your back, right? So you're really
Do you ever feel like
healing.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you have to rebuild up that resiliency then? And I mean, maybe you didn't go through part 3. I cut you off with too much. But maybe we should hit 3 and then I can come back.
Yeah.
Because there's 3, you said, right? Yeah. I mean, you mentioned 8, but now there's like, maybe we could go back.
The thing is, I think it gets tedious. So it's, in general, EMDR, it's broken into 8, but in general, I think it's easier to think about them as like 3 large things.
I like 3. 3 is good enough. Like 3 jars of jelly is enough for me. I can't eat 8 flavors anyway. Yeah. Okay. So 3. What's 3? So we have 2 is trauma processing.
That's right.
1 is like setting up the whole trust and relationship, and then we get
preparing
trauma processing.
That's right.
So what's 3? Denouement, resolution. Okay. I don't know.
Right.
What's 3?
So in the third phase, there's kind of a number of things. This, everybody is an individual, and kind of what we concentrate on can look different for people. Broad strokes, what I will say is that in trauma processing, we are often looking to heal the things that happened. And sometimes when we're done with that, in this kind of third phase, we have to look at healing from the things that didn't happen, that should have happened, right? I should have had a parent that protected me. I deserve to have a dad who respected me or loved me, or, the missing experiences, not just like the, kind of trauma things that happen, but also the things that didn't happen. And there can be, so often what comes up in this phase is grief, or a sense of loss, maybe over, maybe the period of time that was lost in a relationship that was harmful, or, grieving kind of not having the best, childhood experiences, whatever it is. So that's a lot of the work we're doing there. And we do look at kind of building resilience, thinking through like, what are some future scenarios? Like, now that you're kind of seeing the world a little bit more clearly, let's think about, what will you be looking for in like your next relationship? What are green flags for you? What are yellow flags, right? What are red flags? I would say in broad strokes, that's kind of the third, is sort of looking to kind of grieving some of the past stuff and also looking to the future.
Nice. Okay. So now I've got it.
Okay.
Hopefully our listeners do. So I guess the next thing, when I was, for our listeners, we get so many applications to be on the podcast. I feel bad for any of our listeners that are like, I wanted to be on the podcast. But literally, like, I can't do it all, but I love everybody. And, eventually maybe I'll clone myself. But in the meantime, I just want everybody to get another picture, because when you applied to be on here, Rachel, I was like, oh my goodness, how do you do this for these big long chunks of time? I feel like we're constantly told in the media, like, the American like length of attention span is now at TikTok. It's like 90 seconds. Nobody can focus anymore, and then I get you're like, we do this for 5 or 6 hours until it's done. And how does that work? I'm just imagining like 1,200 TikToks, like, not that you're seeing me dancing, Rachel, but I think it's, people might be daunted by like, oh, I can't sit with my trauma for 5 or 6 hours at a stint. But really, tell us more about like why that should not scare us. And how it can actually be helpful to sit in one. I mean, maybe describe that part for us.
Yeah, definitely. I will. So I've played around with this a bit over the years. I have learned now that I cap it to 4 hours. That's about the max I'll do. And we do breaks. So, we'll do a 30-minute break here, or if any, someone needs a bathroom break or whatever. So it's not like grueling in the sense that you will sit, in this room for, 4 complete hours. But it is, I don't want to downplay that it is, I kind of use the analogy with my clients is you were like going in for like a surgical procedure, right? This is in-depth, like serious healing work, and it's going to feel that way. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a challenge. And so, a lot of times when I'm talking with people, even about the decision about whether or not to do an intensive, that is a focus. Like, is this something that you can do right now? Can you take 3 days to like do this healing work for yourself, knowing you're going to come out the other side of it? But obviously, like being in the client seat, it's different, right? Because there's still that like, oh, I don't know if it'll work, like that kind of stuff that comes up, which is fair. But that's usually my work as a therapist too, is like, really helping people see like, no, like really and truly it's worth it. It's like painful. It's a surgery. And it's going to be worth it on the other side. And I've hands down, every single person I've worked with in this has always said 100%, like would do it again, was worth like, I wish that I had done it earlier, like really and truly, because EMDR is so effective.
Do you do all 3 phases at one group? Like,
okay. Yes, I do. So, if I'm doing an intensive, kind of picture it like you're taking the therapeutic relationship and the therapeutic work, and you're like, you're kind of squeezing it all in. So you're still doing everything. You're still doing all the phases. You're just doing it kind of in a shorter amount of time. It's also a part of my job to assess, like if I think, for example, I've referenced for some people, to really achieve a place that's where they're stable enough to do like the deep processing work, that takes years. Those would be people where I would say, let's not do an intensive. Let's work together one-on-one, once a week. We'll be working towards this with the goal of doing an intensive down the line. Because I think you don't want to spend an entire intensive period trying to get stability, when often that work is actually best done kind of slowly in like that like weekly sort of model. But people who are sort of like, okay, I'm in a good place in life. They don't have a lot that they need to kind of do to sort of prepare for surgery, so to speak. We go through all the phases. For many people, I would say probably on average, they do about like 4 to 5 days, like a Monday through Friday thing, 4 hours a day. What I find is that once the trauma memories are activated and we are processing it, people don't actually want to stop. It's like, it's actually in clients that I meet with like for 1 hour and we try to do a little trauma processing, like in that hour, there's a lot of disappointment when the session's over, especially if we didn't complete the memory. So I think unlike kind of like the TikTok videos, trauma does have that way of really grabbing our attention, and like our brain wants to kind of figure out and understand what happened. And so when we really activate that memory, like people in general, people do not struggle with focusing. It's like, yes, okay, like I'm in this memory now. What do I need to like learn from this? What do I need to see? What can I take away from this? And so I think people actually enjoy the spaciousness of like, we have 4 hours. We'll stay with this memory as long as it takes,
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for continuing to take the journey on the Dear Survivor podcast. A quick note, we are 100% volunteer at the podcast and at Take Back the Night. Your donations, your generosity helps us do what we do on such a shoestring budget. And we would be so grateful if this show is helping you through your journey and you are passing it along to others you care about. Please visit the Take Back the Night website and donate and support our cause and our mission to end sexual violence and support survivors. Thank you. I have another question I thought of. Okay. So remember you said stage 1 is the coping skills, and, if they're already addicted or in this, what I'm grappling with is, what if someone is in a state of like self-harm or like self-soothing or like negative, like bad behaviors as a result of their trauma? Mm-hmm. How can you get them to a place, like if that's the root, how are we going to start with getting rid of the result before we deal with the root?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
How do we get rid of the weed without pulling up the root?
Yeah. You're getting right at the heart of this. It's a contradiction.
I'm just thinking about this like myself for the first time, really.
Yeah, no, I think it is a fundamental kind of contradiction in the trauma work where there's this piece about, well, we want you to sort of be stable and well enough to do the work, but in order to be stable and well enough, you have to do the work.
Yeah, that's right. I was just like rolling it through in my head, and I was thinking like, okay, now I'm sitting there with you, and like, what if, the conversation was like, yeah, I thought about killing myself 12 times already. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah. What I would say is that, and this is where, you want to work, you do want to work with somebody who's had a lot of experience, particularly people that work, I think, with some of the really chronic forms of trauma. As therapists, like we know it's normal to feel suicidal. If you have experienced kind of chronic sexual assault or sexual abuse, like, physical abuse throughout childhood, it's very rare to find someone who doesn't feel at least passively sort of suicidal all the time. That's a part of trauma. That's a part of it. That's a trauma response. Other therapists can get a little scared of that because they maybe don't work with clients who are experiencing that all the time. What we're looking for is, it's really kind of it's a risk analysis. So are you, for example, let's take like self-harm or suicidality. What we want to know is, when we go into a session and we're processing a trauma memory, do you think that's going to kind of take you to a place where you're going to leave here and really become actively suicidal? Or is it going to maybe build a little bit of hope of, oh shit, maybe healing's really possible. I can't believe I processed that memory, Same thing with substance use, are you going to, we want to look at like, is there a risk that you're going to leave this session today and it was very difficult and you go and overdose on something, as a strategy for coping? We don't need people to be,
perfectly glued together.
Exactly. Yes. Because
I got you.
Right. That's the nature. So it's, when I say stability, I think I'm really thinking about it from a standpoint of, we don't want you to die during this process. And so if somebody is like, in a place where really on the verge of overdosing, maybe, or already kind of in an addiction so much that they are already overdosing. Same thing with somebody who's like kind of really on the verge of serious, like, I really don't have hope anymore and I want to die and I'm going to take steps to do that, this might be the thing that pushes them over the edge because it's hard. Somebody who's like, it wouldn't be the end of the world if I died. Maybe I'll kill myself if this process doesn't work. I might still work with that person, right? It's, so it's really about kind of gauging that level of risk. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. That was perfect, Rachel. And I guess in the last little snippet here, I think I'm again thinking like our listeners, and does this work for any gender, any age or stage, any human basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. You can use EMDR. I think I've seen it used in children as young as 4, and all the way up. I mean, there is no age max on it. Works for people of all genders, all races. It's been used very successily in countries all over the world. It's
okay.
Yeah, anybody with a human brain, maybe even animals. I don't know. Never tried.
Right, I don't know either. And then if our listeners wanted to learn more about your practice and how it's unique and different, where would they go to do that?
Oh, yeah. So you can go to my website. It's EMDR Intensives. That's plural, boston.com. And you can find out all about intensives. And I have like a FAQ on the website. And then a blog as well, which can be helpful for people just to kind of get a better sense of like who I am and this work.
Awesome. And what about remote work? Like, can they do it with you? Is it better to do it in person, or can it be done online?
Yeah. So I am licensed to work within Massachusetts. So anybody, I can work with somebody in Western Massachusetts remotely. One of the things that's nice about intensives is I do actually have people who will come from like out of state and do intensive work with me and then fly home. So it's like, it's kind of a way that you can access therapy without having like that therapist actually in your state. Cause it's like, you come, you do the work 4 or 5 days, and then you go home. So I, do work with people really and truly from all over the globe, I would say, and particularly around the U.S. People will travel to come do the work, and then I certainly work with tons of local Bostonites as well.
And do you have others in your group, or is it you are a solo practitioner there?
I'm a solo practitioner. Yep.
Okay. Well, this is so informative, and you painted it so well, and I bombarded you with questions. Like, it's so clear to me now, and I think hopefully our listeners really got a better understanding of the whole process. And it sounds like surgery. I think you described it so well. Rachel's like, nobody really wants it, but if you need it, you need it. Yeah. And then you get through it, and then you keep going. So I think it sounds fantastically hopeful.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to share today about your practice, or, for our survivors listening?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say in general, you don't have to live with PTSD. I think people really believe that you do, that, trauma responses are lifelong. It's just not true. Used to be true, but we have really effective treatments now. So I do want people to know that like really and truly healing is possible.
Perfect. Well, Rachel, it's such a pleasure to have you on the program, and I know lots of people are going to learn more, and maybe some of our folks will come and find you and visit you in Boston, especially when it's nice weather.
I know spring is coming.
Like, it's so cold. It's almost. I mean, I know we'll air this and people will listen to it at any time, but it can be lovely in the fall. But it can be pretty blizzardy sometimes too.
That's right.
But at least it's a great place. It's got so much to offer. If someone does want to go to Boston, obviously there's the Charles River and, like the whaling. And I'm not trying to be this salesperson for Boston, but having
it's a nice city now.
Yeah, spoken everywhere. So it's a pretty cool town. But again, we'll make sure we put more information about your services in the show notes. And Rachel, such a pleasure to meet you and have you on the program.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And, for our listeners, I think, again, I really hope you will do that journaling and, something that, maybe you didn't think about how to process, that those stages can be really helpful, and envisioning yourself getting through them and doing something so intensive and then being so empowered and free sounds just fantastic. So please continue on the Dear Katie podcast journey, and together we thrive and survive. Take care. Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.